The 543rd edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you live late on a Friday night, but that means if we're here late on a weeknight, that means we probably got something fun, something important to talk about, and that's certainly the case as Carolina lands the big man they've been looking to get in the portal really each of the last 2 seasons. We'll talk about who that player is, what he'll bring to Carolina, and expectations for him upon his arrival in Chapel Hill. Another guy that we talked about really earlier today, point guard Nathan George from Georgia Tech. He goes somewhere else in the portal, so we'll talk about where Carolina looks to go to next in the portal to add a guard or two to the roster. And former Carolina big man Jalen Washington has found his new home. We'll tell you where that is and our thoughts on that destination. Before we do any of that, though, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. I use this one really around this time of the year, even more so during high school recruiting. But it's a thought from Armando Bacot that says, quote, "If you don't want to commit to UNC, don't visit, because if you do, you will," end quote. And we talked earlier today. We talked about Nathan George. When Carolina got involved with him, we provided the update on Arizona big man Henr Veesaar, and just where that recruitment stood. We knew that he came into Carolina for a visit, has traveled back to Tucson, but everything that was being reported about his recruiting led us to believe he'd be committing to Carolina sometime in the near future. I thought it would be after at least the Final Four came and went, but he decided to do it on the eve of the Final Four when he announced his commitment to Carolina earlier this afternoon. And this is significant because Carolina got the big man they needed to get this portal cycle and what they didn't get last portal cycle to really solidify the front court of their roster. This past year, he averaged 9.4 points per game, 5 rebounds, and shot 59% from the field. He played in 35 games and started 5 of them for a team that made the Sweet 16. He stands at 7 foot tall, 200 pounds. He's an overseas big man from Estonia. So, has got a little bit of an international flavor to his game. He's got a little bit of an edge and a toughness that I think, Hubert Davis will like and appreciate. And quite frankly, this roster needs, because they need to be a little bit more tougher and have a little bit more of a vocal presence on and off the court. But, we talked from the moment that Carolina's season came to an end and started outlining what they had to do in the portal. We knew they had to go get a big man. That was job one. As much as they need to add a guard or two to this roster, they needed to go get a big man. because we expected Jalen Washington to depart, and that happened. We like Vin Allen Lubin, but you needed something more than what Vin Allen Lubin could offer you. James Brown, who we expected to be back entering his sophomore year, probably not ready to contribute, and we don't know what Zayden High's status is for next season. So it was imperative that Carolina got a big man. You can almost go as far as say that really Hubert Davis's job security might have depended on it, because if they did not land a big man of significance in the portal, going to be really hard to envision Carolina winning at the level he needs to win at next year to solidify himself on the bench for the years to come. It appears that Carolina got that in Henr Veesaar, the transfer from Arizona, that I think gives this fan base something to be excited about while we watch our arch rivals, the Duke Blue Devils, compete this weekend in the Final Four.
Yeah, this is a huge boost for Carolina. This is a huge boost for Hubert Davis to get a guy in here that fits the mold of what you were looking for last year in the transfer portal and what you've been looking for really ever since, which is a physical presence on the inside for Carolina that's going to be able to score the ball, that's going to be able to defend at a pretty high level. Everything that you need him to do, he is going to be able to do that for you. Not to mention the fact that he has split time before at Arizona. Played just 20 minutes per game this year, which means that he's okay with splitting his role with somebody. So that could open the door for you to bring back Vin Allen Lubin for this coming season, which is something that I think Carolina was hoping they would be able to do with their big men this year. So I think they have found really the perfect guy out of the transfer portal. And it's like we said, this was really their one guy. They had locked in on him. And if they did not end up landing him, we don't know where Carolina would have gone. So you're right. I think Hubert Davis's job really did lie on landing Visar. And now the question is, is he enough for Carolina, or do you have to find that guard, that point guard, that scoring guard that you currently don't have? I think that's, certainly part of what we're going to talk about here. But I think you need to take a moment as a Tar Heel fan. We've talked about it, how you have to celebrate the wins. Well, today was a win. This is one of those wins for you. Yes, it doesn't come on the court, but it's one in the offseason that you needed, and last year you weren't able to get. So this year it's a big deal. And I think that Carolina, the work that they put in to land one of the top guys. I mean, he's ranked as, I believe, the 36th overall prospect in the portal, but he's ranked as, I think it's either the second or third center in the portal. So Carolina goes out and gets one of the biggest names at the position that they needed so dearly, and they deserve to be credited for that. And that's why I think the next couple of days are really important for this Carolina fan base to give this group a little bit of praise for getting the piece that they needed down at center.
Well, right now you have your first headlining piece of this transfer portal class, because we said when we got Jonathan Powell earlier this week, and we really liked the addition, but that could not be a guy that was your top transfer or your top transfer when this thing comes to an end. You had to go get other guys of significance, and this is what Carolina has right now. Now what you want to see is, can you build momentum off of this commitment? You've now got, 2 this week alone, but now you've got one that is very impactful, and it just changes the dynamic around your roster, changes the feelings around what Carolina could be as this roster continues to fill itself out as this offseason moves along. And so, I do think Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, you give them a round of applause. They can go to bed tonight a little bit more rested than they probably have been, because there's no doubt this was priority focus one, was going and finding a big man. And to be quite frank, man, it was a lot harder this year than it was last year, because there weren't this, last year, how many big men came in that it made sense for Carolina to want to get involved with? 5, 6, 7, 8 big men. Hasn't been the case this transfer portal cycle. This transfer portal, very much guard heavy, which is why you've seen Carolina very active in terms of being in contact with a bunch of guards. But When they got involved with Noah Williamson, that was okay. There was production there, but he's at the Patriot level. How is he going to transition? You had the kid from UAB who a lot of people said that if we didn't get him, then this was going to be a bust. But with what, Dusty May was able to do with two big men, it makes sense why I know they were the favorites to land him. Not quite sure if he officially landed there or not. But, so when Carolina turned their attention to Henry, it made sense why they went all in. And I do think, for what it's worth, for as much troubles as Carolina has had in the portal, it does feel like when this staff has had their backs to the wall and they've had to go all out and get that guy, they were able to get him. 2 years ago, it was Harrison Ingram, who looked like he was on his way to Kansas. Hubert Davis shows up in Texas, whole staff's with them. It really changed the tone of that recruitment. He comes to Chapel Hill, becomes as beloved a Tar Heel as we've had so far in the transfer portal era. I'm not saying that Visar is the same type of player, is going to have the same type of impact, but Carolina had all their cards on the table. They were as all in on him as possible. And so while I think some people felt discouraged that he left Chapel Hill without a commitment, the fact that 24, 36 hours after that visit is final, he's committing to Carolina is a good sign for Hubert Davis that he can still sell himself, sell his program to kids that are in the portal that he needs to help sure they can win the games he needs to win that next season.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for him. It's important for Jim Tanner. I mean, people were already questioning him and really what the GM was doing for Carolina, but I think they were going to lock in ultimately on one guy at the center position, because I think part of the reason that the program has gotten to where it's at is because they took so many shots last year and swung and missed at the big man spot. So I think they were going to be strategic about who they went after this year. They weren't going to just throw a bunch of names out there and get those expectations up from the fan base like they did a year ago. And so, Visar, ends up becoming the guy that's out there, that's available, and Carolina, really locks in on him. And I mean, again, you look at the numbers that he had, and I know people are not going to be blown away by a guy that had, 9.4 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per game, and 1.1 blocks per game. They're going to say, well, is that really a guy that's going to be able to take Carolina's front court to the next level? Well, first of all, you don't have a guy that can protect the rim the way that he does. That you didn't have that all of this year. I mean, Vin Allen Lubin had moments where he did a decent job at that, but again, it was more flashes in the pan. Same thing for Jalen Washington. This is a guy that consistently can protect the rim. He has a 6.5 block rate, which is pretty good for a guy that plays as little as he did this past year. And that's the same thing when it comes to the rebounding. I mean, he played 20.8 minutes per game this year. So a little over half of the game he was playing. That means that, this is a guy that coming in here, if he expands his role, you would imagine that his numbers only get better. Even if he doesn't expand his role, you've got Vin Allen Lubin, who is, starting to show you towards the end of the season that he is a capable big at this level. So now you've got the flexibility of being able to play either one of those guys or possibly playing both of those guys in certain lineups moving forward. Because here's the thing about Veesaar that I really like is that he has the ability to stretch the floor. Is he a guy that's going to shoot a ton of them? No. This past year, he shot 49 threes. He hit 16 of them. It's just enough, though, when he is on the floor to be able to get the job done. So I think that this was a huge addition in a multitude of different ways for Carolina, both on the offensive end of the floor and then defensively. He brings a level of toughness that I think Carolina really needs. We saw it in the game against Duke. He really performed well in that game. 13 points, 6 rebounds. That's something that Carolina can certainly use. And I think this is one of those guys that, the more that he continues to grow, at the college level, I think he's only going to get better. I think you're going to see more minutes for him here in Chapel Hill, and I think that's only going to work in his favor. And I really think, I mean, Sam Vecini who does some NBA draft stuff, not sure what outlet he is for, but he was talking about Visar entering the transfer portal, and he said, look, this is a guy that probably is going to be an NBA big at some point. And you don't see NBA bigs that enter the transfer portal all that often. It's rare that those guys are going to change destinations. So Carolina getting him is a really big get. Yes, he still has to progress, but eventually he looks like a guy that's going to make it to the NBA level. So that is high praise for a guy that Carolina fans, I think some of them are on board with this move. Most of them are. There are a very small percentage that are questioning some of the numbers that we've seen from him, but they should know that this is a legitimately good player, and there's a reason why he was one of the top bigs in the transfer portal.
This says more about how inconsistent Carolina's front court was. But if you put 9 points and 5 rebounds on last year's roster from November to the time their season ended, the season goes differently for Carolina. Do they do what we wanted them to do? That answer is still probably no. They probably win a game or two in the non-con that they got beat. They maybe get that game against Florida where they couldn't secure a rebound. Mm-hmm. Maybe they beat Michigan State, and they're not backing themselves into the NCAA tournament, getting a better seed. And we just probably feel a lot better about where the program is at right now than where we are, where we're coming off a first round tournament exit after being a preseason top 10 team. That was the last team in the tournament field. So, if his floor is 9 points, 5 rebounds, assuming Ben Allen Lubin's back next year, and Lube looks like the guy we saw the last 10 games of the year, then Carolina's front court's going to be in so much better shape. It's going to be so much more explosive, dynamic, versatile than it was this past year. And you could argue as maybe as deep and as versatile as it's been really outside the first year when you had Brady Manick playing that stretch 4 position as well as he was able to do maybe, 2 years ago when you had Harrison Ingram playing that stretch 4, but he was an undersized 4-man that, just played really hard. And that's why he had the type of success he was able to have, mainly as a rebounder and as a defender. No, the numbers are not sexy. They're not jaw-dropping numbers. But that's not what Carolina had to go get. Carolina just had to go get a guy that could hold his own, play that position at this level. Mm-hmm. He can do that. Like if you watched Arizona down the stretch when they were getting into their rhythm and looking like the team they were supposed to be when they were a preseason top 10 team, he was a big reason why. You had Caleb Love, you had some other guys on that roster that got a lot of attention, but he was the guy that was, getting second chance scoring opportunities, getting offensive rebounds. This is a guy that I think Hubert Davis can use in pick and roll situations, that can pick and pop, that can pick and roll and catch that pocket pass, let alone just set screens that he needs to set to free open whoever you're trying to get open on the perimeter to get cleaner looks from the outside. And so, I think you can expect his numbers to increase with his minutes to increase. If he averaged 9 and 5 in 20 minutes, what does those numbers look like if he plays 27, 28 minutes? Maybe 12 and 8? Carolina's getting 12 and 8 in its front court. Depending on how this backcourt shapes up, they're going to be very formidable, I think, next year. I love what it can do for Ben Allen Lubin, and just in terms of, whether he comes off the bench. I think Hubert Davis has to explore trying to find a way to have those two guys play together, because I think we've seen it this year with the 3 teams that play with 2 bigs at the same time at different points in the year that are still playing in the Final Four. You can still play basketball that way. You still maybe have to do some things that are a little bit more modern with them, but teams that play with 2 bigs on the floor are still proven to be matchup nightmares once you get into the NCAA tournament. So, I just find it hard to believe with how much of a need this was to land him and not be excited about it. Like, I was at an event tonight with my family for my little sister and her school. The people that know me know that I do what I do here for a living. And I had multiple people come up and talk to me about this guy that are maybe casual at best Carolina fans, but saw that the Heels got a big man in the portal and knows what it means. And so I do think you should be excited. You should be re-energized. If you're one of those guys that's on the fence about Hubert Davis, maybe you haven't bought into there being a front office put in place. I think, these are the benefits of that. And so Carolina, has more work to do. But you do actually now have a headlining piece for your transfer portal class, which was a big necessity for Hubert Davis. I don't think he could have entered next season and tried to sell optimism if he brought in role players. You had to bring in difference makers. Henr Veesaar is a difference maker, and we've seen that in his 2 years with the Arizona program. And so, we kind of just talked right there about, kind of expectations for him. So don't really need to double down on that. I do wonder, though, because Ven-Allen Lubin is not officially confirmed to be back. Everything is still, from what I've been told by a few people that are close to the situation, that it's all but a formality that he's expected to be back. He wants to stay. Carolina's met the NIL number that he was looking for to ensure that he didn't go somewhere else to play his final season of college basketball. Are we still confident that we'll be having we'll have a front court that consists of Ven-Allen Lubin in Chapel Hill next year, now that Henr Veesaar is on his way from Tucson?
Yeah, I don't think Visar necessarily is going to keep him from returning. I think, as you mentioned, and I think something that we're going to be mentioning a lot this offseason is that Carolina is going to have a chance to play two bigs because it has worked. And you can go with that more traditional in the paint type of player, whether that's at the 4 or the 5 spot. I think that certainly, some people would say, well, Caleb Wilson is certainly going to be that 4 for you, right? We don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I think he's definitely a guy that, we could see in that role, but I think there's also a chance that we could see with the way he defends and, the way that he, performed offensively at times. You could see him at the 3. He's also a guy that we saw the other night in the All-American game, is a little bit of a work in progress as well. Even though he's the number 5 overall prospect in the recruiting class, it's not a guarantee that he's going to come in and automatically be a starter, especially if a guy like Ven-Allen Lubin can continue to prove what he proved on the offensive end of the floor at the end of the year last year. So to me, there's going to be a role for Lubin on this team. If they're not going to play two bigs, if they're going to stick to playing more of the modern, 4-around-1 type, I think then you're going to have him splitting time off the bench with Veesaar. And I think the thing is that he will certainly be able to do that. And I think Veesaar is a guy that's willing to play that way as well. So, he did it at Arizona. If you tell him he has to split time again here, I don't think he's going to have that much of an issue with it, especially because of the money that he's getting paid. And so I think there is certainly an avenue that Ven-Allen Lubin could be back. And here's the thing, even if he plays less minutes, you wonder if by having a guy like Visar who can sort of wear these guys out a little bit easier than a Jalen Washington did in the limited minutes that he played, does that help Ven-Allen Lubin and allow him to be more efficient this year throughout the entire season as opposed to just at the end of the year? I really think that's the thing that you have to sell to Ven-Allen Lubin if he's coming back, is that, yes, you might be splitting minutes with this guy, but what he's going to bring to the table is going to make your job easier. And so I certainly believe that as of right now, he is going to be back for next year.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe, Ven-Allen Lubin played at Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, and now Carolina. He's a smart guy. You don't get into those 3 schools academically by being an idiot. He knew even when he made those comments after the season-ending loss to Ole Miss that, okay, I want to be back, they're also going to go find another big man. Like, I think he was very much aware of that. People might hear me say, well, you want him back because of the way that you defended him a year ago, and you might be partly right. Also, look at the way that guy played the last 10 games of the season down the stretch. Mm-hmm. Like, he was a guy that became a big man that you could run offense through. He could isolate himself on the low block and get buckets. You look at the win over Wake Forest that effectively secured Carolina's spot in the tournament. He made two game-winning plays with a block on one end and an offensive rebound putback dunk on the other. And so I thought there was just so much progression that was made that I'd hate to see that go somewhere else. Yeah. And so I think he was really just starting to scratch the surface of the type of player he could be here. I do think he had to go through the adjustment period, not of playing against ACC caliber talent, but the noise and understanding that, man, when you're here, when you play well, we're going to sit there, we're going to pat you on the back, and we're going to sing your praises. When you have some of those performances that he had where he was a non-factor, you're going to hear about that. But I think he finally settled in, reminded himself he could play at this level, he could be a difference maker. And those last 10 games, man, there wasn't a player that got more out of his talent on this roster than Ben Allen Lubin. And so I'd hate to see that go somewhere else. I'm intrigued about the possibility of those two guys playing together. Also, if he's back, man, Carolina legitimately has front court depth. It's a legitimate bona fide thing. It exists. And we haven't really had that in Hubert Davis's 4 years. And so that's something else that you should excite you, because depth matters, man. You got to be able to play 7, 8, 9 deep if you want to play deep into the tournament. Look at the teams that are still standing. These aren't shallow teams. These are teams that can play their 8th or 9th guy on the roster. The way to do that is to keep guys in your program like Ben Allen Lubin. So, it's not official, but everyone expects him to be back. I don't think this move, as excited as we are, I don't think it moves the needle and makes Ben Allen Lubin want to go somewhere else for his final year of college basketball. Let's go on and get to the other bit of news that we've got to discuss. When we talked with you this morning, man, we were sitting here talking about how Nate George, the Georgia Tech transfer, maybe was becoming right behind Visar, the second most important player for Carolina in this transfer portal cycle. The Heels had a Zoom call with him. It was reported and confirmed that took place on Thursday. No one said that it was going to lead to anything, and it didn't, because he ultimately stays within the conference, but he goes to Syracuse, will not be in Chapel Hill next year. We talked about this very topic, literally 12 hours ago or so, and we're saying that he was right there, top 2, top 3 priority for Carolina right now in the transfer portal, because 2 years left of college experience. We loved his size, we loved his ability to guard, defend, rebound, pass. Was really a complete point guard, if you will. That guy's not coming here though, and so now when you look at Carolina, where do they go next? Because they still need to add at least 1, if not 2 guards to make this offseason feel like make it seem as successful as we want it to be, and truthfully as we need it to be.
Yeah, the rumors are that there are guys that haven't entered the portal yet that Carolina is apparently in good standing with. But here's the problem with that. How long are you going to wait on these guys? If they're telling you they're going to enter, but they ultimately are not entering, then you need to look at the guys that are out there and you need to go find your guy. I think you've got to find a scoring point guard. We have said this. I have said this since we began talking about this transfer portal cycle. You've got to find that one guy that can score the ball for you consistently out of that point guard spot. And now, I go back to a guy that we talked about, coming out of Miami when he first entered the portal. Nigel Pack is the guy that I think the attention should turn to right now. I know that he's a guy that has played off the ball, But this is a guy that gives you very similar feels to RJ Davis in terms of just how he scores the basketball. He can create shots on his own. He's a good catch and shoot guy as well. I think this is a guy that can do everything that Carolina needs him to do. He's played in the ACC. He's been very successful. Now, the thing is that we know Miami, they pay a lot of money over there. We know his, when he was originally brought into Miami, it was made very public how much money he was making when he transferred in from Kansas State. And so this is a guy that Carolina is going to have to be willing to pay, but I think they should definitely be in on him because outside of that, I mean, unless you're getting involved with a guy like Pop Isaacs, the transfer out of Creighton, who is projected to go to Ole Miss, but still hasn't landed there just yet. Nick Boyd, I think, is still a guy that's on Carolina's board. It is interesting that Wisconsin did end up landing Andrew Rohde, but that's a guy that's more going to play off the ball as opposed to on the ball. So who knows if they're bringing in Boyd to sort of take over for John Tonjai. If they are, then I still think there's a chance that he ends up being the guy. But to me, I think Nigel Pack has got to be that guy that you're locking in on right now and attempting to go after because you need that one guy. And then maybe you end up adding someone like a Nick Dorn as well at that position to help you scoring wise off the bench. I think that should be the goal for Carolina as we sit here right now, because I mean, when we were talking about it earlier in the offseason, we were thinking that you wouldn't have Ian Jackson back. I don't know what Ian Jackson is planning on doing. I don't know if he's planning to enter the NBA draft. No idea what Drake Powell's planning to do. Seth Trimble, I think, more than likely will be back. I mean, until you find out what Ian Jackson is going to do, you don't know how big of a need that second scoring guard is going to be for you. So I think you're hoping that right now Ian Jackson's going to be back, and really all you have to do is find that one scoring guard out of the one spot, and that should be enough for you. But that's something that we're going to have to monitor over the next week or so, and hopefully we get a decision sooner rather than later from Ian Jackson on what exactly he's going to do.
Yeah, Nigel Pack, I think, makes a lot of sense. Well-traveled, veteran guard, knows the conference, knows Carolina very well. I think he could be a seamless addition to the roster. You've got Jalen Lowe, the guard from Pitt, that's also in the portal. Our good buddy, dear friend Josh Milo was talking to me about him earlier this week, and I said, look, I as a player, love him. Like, we saw what he did against Carolina. That's a big-time player, and he made big-time shots against the Heels when they beat us back in their place back in February. I just don't know if I'm comfortable adding a Pittsburgh guy to the roster, which now in the theory, like if that guy wants to come here, you're not going to say no. I'm just saying that as a fan, do I want some Capel leftover on the roster? In theory, I'd probably say that answer is no, but, you beggars can't be choosers. The name to monitor that's not in the portal that everyone's talking about is Trey Holloman from Michigan State. And if he ends up going portaling, I think you're going to see Carolina probably go as all in on him as they did with Visar from Arizona. The issue is he's got to put his name in the portal for that to become an option, because I can't confirm this. I don't think Carolina tampers with guys the way that some of these other programs do. And maybe they should. Maybe they should start doing that because that's the name of the game. But you see some of these guys, they end up entering the portal because this school has contacted them and told them, hey, I can get you X, Y, and Z if you come here. And I don't know what the holdup is for Holloman. I think a lot of it might be the fact that there was the scuttlebutt about maybe Tom Izzo retiring. If there's any truth to that, maybe he's waiting for that to be finalized. I know that's the name I've been told on and off the record, and I've seen on some of these channels as a potential name for Carolina to be interested in if he enters the portal. But all that's a mute point if he never goes portaling. So I think Carolina right now is, I don't think stuck is the right word. They're just kind of in a holding pattern. where they need some answers from their roster, i.e. Ian Jackson, i.e. Drake Powell. Because I think if Powell goes portaling, then Cannon Catchings becomes a real important target for Carolina once again. Like, I think they would be as heavily interested in adding him to the roster if they lose a guy like Drake Powell. So the good news is that they've cast a wide net. They're involved with as many guards as possible, but none of that matters ultimately unless you land at least one of them.
Yeah. And Holloman, I'm trying to see. I thought I saw that he was in the portal, but maybe I saw that wrong. Maybe that was the name that some people were speculating would potentially be in the portal. I mean, yeah, he to me makes more sense, I think, than Jalen Lowe. He shot 37.3% from the field, 32.9% from three. Thing about Jalen Lowe, man, is I know he scored the ball at a high rate this year for Pittsburgh. I mean, he shot 37.6% from the field. And the more concerning thing is he shot just 26.6% from three. Now, you go back to last year, and last year, he was an on and off guy in terms of being a starter, but still, finished with 9.6 points per game. Shared the ball pretty well with 3.3 rebounds, which he shared the ball well this year as well. But he shot the ball at 38.8% from the field and 35.2% from three. So I think what you're hoping is that, this past year, yeah, there was a lot more volume, but he was really one of the only guys on the team that was able to score the ball the way that they needed to. There was so much focus on him, and maybe that was part of the reason that he struggled to shoot the ball the way that he did. But yeah, I think, Jalen Lowe is certainly a name to watch. Holloman is definitely a name that I think a lot of people want on the radar as well. If he enters the transfer portal, I think you're right. That would probably become the team's top guy if he does end up entering the portal. And yeah, I still think that a lot of people are keeping eyes on what does Nick Boyd end up doing. I think this was a guy that originally people were concerned about the fact that he was, coming from a mid-major conference. But I think now that they've really dug into his stats and everything like that, and looking at where he came from originally, being a guy that was on the Final Four team at Florida Atlantic, I think people have really come around on him as well. So I think, any of the guys that come from a power conference school, or if it's Nick Boyd who has that experience of being in the Final Four, I think all of those would be acceptable. But you're just hoping that Carolina can sort of gain traction with those guys here, sooner rather than later, because the longer that you wait, the better chance that you don't end up landing somebody. There are still going to be other names that will enter the portal. I mean, there were guys that we did not think would enter the portal. I mean, Mohamed Diabate popping in there today from Alabama. Got to be honest, that one was really shocking to me. I don't think he fits what Carolina needs right now. Now, if Drake Powell ends up leaving, maybe then you start to have a little bit more of a conversation about whether Carolina should bring him in or not. But that's a big name that entered the portal. So there could be guys that play in the Final Four that end up entering their name into the transfer portal as well, if they don't like their roles that they're currently playing in, if they think they can make more NIL money. So I think once we get through this weekend, I think that's when you're really going to find out who's serious about entering the transfer portal, who's not, and then you'll have that refined list that Carolina can choose from and potentially be able to go after certain guys. They need to lock in on one or two of those guys, I think, find the ones that fit the best and try to go out and get them.
All right, let's get to the last bit of piece of news before we get out of here. We know it's late here on a Friday night. Earlier this week, Elliot Cadeau, the Carolina transfer, landed at Michigan. We talked about that landing spot. And then earlier today, this afternoon, this evening, former Carolina big man Jalen Washington's found his new basketball home. He'll go to Vanderbilt and play for the Commodores next season. That program, one of the best stories in the sport this past year, going to the NCAA tournament, losing in the first round to St. Mary's. So just really quickly, don't want to spend too much time now talking about a former Tar Heel. Are you surprised that he stayed at the power conference level? I thought maybe this guy was clearly going to go down to the mid majors, but I know Ohio State was showing interest in him. He ultimately stays at the power conference level, goes to the SEC, which this past season put the most teams ever in the tournament from a single conference, and played for a school that played in the tournament just this past year. So what do you make of Jalen Washington's new home now that he's with Vanderbilt out of the SEC?
It's interesting for sure because he got bullied by a guy playing in the SEC in the tournament in Malik Dia, and they say for some reason Vanderbilt says to themselves, we got to get a piece of that. I don't know why. But I'm not going to hate on him. I mean, look, I'm not going to hate on Vanderbilt for the move either. I think maybe just to change the scenery is what he needs. Maybe, going somewhere else, maybe that opens up some of the things that we talked about with him, like being able to shoot away from the basket. Maybe that starts to open up a little bit more for him. Maybe he is able to put on just a little bit more size and be able to battle on the inside. But I think for Vanderbilt, it's a risky pickup. There's no doubt about it. It depends to me, on how much, how much ultimately, he ends up putting in the work in the gym this year. I think it also depends on the role that they're looking at for him. What kind of role are they actually looking at? Do they believe that this is a guy that's coming in there that's going to potentially start for them? Because if they believe that, then I think they need to take a second. They need to look at what he did this year, evaluate his tape a little bit further, and come to the conclusion that this is a guy that is not ready to contribute at that high of a rate just yet. I think that he is certainly, someone that we're going to be rooting for. The fact that he goes to a school like Vanderbilt makes it very easy to root for him. But I do think that, the expectations for that program, they're going to start to go up. Mark Byington did a really good job in his first year there, took them to the NCAA tournament. The expectation is going to be that they can be a consistent tournament team moving forward, especially if the SEC is going to stay as powerful as it is. So I'll be interested to see the role that they have for him there next season, because if he's in a similar role to the one that he was in this year, maybe a little bit more expanded because he has another offseason of growth, then I think it's perfect. If they're expecting him to come in there and be like what we thought he was going to be coming into this past season and become that starter that you can rely on, I just don't know if that's going to work out.
Yeah, look, I was very critical of Jay Wash. I said the Cardinal sin of this past season was him not ready to be the five-man the roster needed him to be. That was a twofold issue, part player fault, part coaching fault. And I said as the season moved along, man, I question if he's a starting big man at the power conference level. I know he was not a big man that could play at Carolina. Just the way that we want our bigs to play, we need our bigs to play, he didn't fit the mold. With the way that Mark Byington runs his stuff, a lot of 5-out, very perimeter-oriented, maybe he'll be a lot more comfortable playing there where expectations aren't as high, but now you're playing in what was the best conference in the sport this past season. So wishing him the best of luck. Like you said, easy guy to root for because of where he's going. He's a sweet kid. He's a good kid. He probably didn't deserve the things to be said about him by guys like me and some others, but that's just the reality of the situation when you play here and you underperform. But so I'll be interested to see what that looks like. And can he produce, or does he ultimately, just never really be the type of player we thought he was going to be when he arrived as a top 100 recruit coming out of high school? With that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast. In the meantime, we will direct you to the website, that's HeelToughBlog.com. The big news of the day was already covered and written for you guys. So you can go read a little bit more in-depth about Henr Veesaar and his commitment to Carolina as we continue to keep you up to date on all the news and notes around Carolina basketball during this very busy offseason. But it wasn't just basketball that landed a commit today. So did Bill Belichick in Carolina football. Anthony has you covered on that front as well. So get to the website, read about both the commitments that the top 2 programs on campus landed today as we continue to keep you up to date with the latest and the best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the basketball off season. Whenever there's news, we're recording. So, hence why we did 2 podcasts today on a Friday before the Final Four. So you want to make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any of our wall-to-wall in-depth coverage of the transfer portal this offseason. With that, guys, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.